Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question for each of the leaders. It'll be brief but related. President Biden, first for you. How confident should Asia be about a robust American commitment to a nuclear umbrella when the commander-in-chief who preceded you and is looking to succeed you spoke openly about reducing the U.S. footprint in the Korean Peninsula? President Yoon, how much confidence can Japan and the U.S. have about Seoul's long-term commitment to rapprochement when polls show the solid majority of Korea disapproves of your handling and mending of the forced labor issue? And Prime Minister Kishida, what assurances can you give to your country's citizens who fear bolstering your security cooperation in this matter could lead to the country into an economic Cold War with China? And if you'll indulge me, Mr. President, on a domestic matter, what is your reaction to the special counsel appointment last week into your son? Thank you.
Well, first of all, look, there's not much, if anything, I agree on with my predecessor on foreign policy. His America First policy, walking away from the rest of the world, has made us weaker, not stronger. America's strong with our allies and our alliances, and that's why we will endure. And it's a strength that, quite frankly, increases all or three of our strengths. This is just about one summit. What makes today different is it actually launching a series of initiatives that are actually institutional changes in how we deal with one another. And security cooperation, economic cooperation, technology cooperation, development cooperation, consultation exercises. And all of this will create its own momentum, I believe, year by year, month by month, to make the relationship stronger and more certain to remain, to be in place. And with regard on these results, I think are going to keep it going, and I think are going to benefit all our countries. And with regard to the second question, I have no comment on any investigation that's going on. That's up to the Justice Department, and that's all I have to say.
제게 하신 질문에 대해서는
To the question that was directed to me, I would like to say that the treaty made between Korea and Japan that was made in 1965 and the following measures by the government and the Supreme Court's ruling in 2015 has some differences, but we have already implemented measures to bridge the gaps among them. And in South Korea, of course, there is public opinion that is opposed to the government's measures like that. However, from a perspective that's forward-looking, strengthening ties and improving relationship between Korea and Japan are important, and there is a shared understanding that this matters to our bilateral relationship as well as our future, and this is something we need to continue working on.
Thank you for the question. First of all, at today's meeting, the rules-based international order and activities inconsistent to such rule-based international order and activities, the concerns have been shared, and the rule-based free and open international order must be defended. And going forward, U.S.-Japan ROK strategic collaboration will be reinforced even further. Such endeavors will continue going forward. Our country and for the surrounding countries, the response capabilities as well as defense capabilities will be bolstered, and by doing so, the lives and livelihood of our population will be protected, and the sense of assurance must be raised. These are the important activities. Having said that, with regard to China, Last year in November, there was the Japan-China Leaders Summit, and there was a positive momentum. By maintaining the positive momentum, what has to be asserted will be asserted, and we shall strongly request responsible conduct. And we will continue and accumulate the conversation about multiple issues. We will cooperate with regard to common challenges. Such constructive and stable relationship will be established by mutual effort. That is my administration's consistent policy. Based on this perception towards regional stability, our efforts will continue. Thank you.
President Yoon, next question, please.
질문. 아, 네. 자, 우리 Money Today.
Please go ahead and ask a question. The reporter from Money Today, reporter named Jongjin Park, please go ahead with your question. Hi, I'm Jongjin Park of Money Today. First of all, I would like to ask a question to President Yoon Suk-yeol of the Republic of Korea. I heard that you stated that a new chapter has opened in our trilateral cooperation with the two countries. Compared to the previous summits, what would be the most significant outcome that you gained through this summit? And also, from the perspective of our people, what will be the benefit that the people of Korea would feel from these strengthening of ties? And now my question goes to President Biden. During this summit, the issues of detainees or prisoners of wars, and you mentioned that there will be further cooperation in these human rights issues. And you also said you would support the free and peaceful Korean Peninsula and the region. And what kind of shift would there be in your policy, and what kind of specific solutions do you have in these regard? Lastly, I would like to direct my question to Prime Minister Kishida. Today, we had the historic trilateral summit. However, there was much backlash and many concerns in Korea. However, President Yoon showed his political courage to do so. That's the international community's evaluation. However, there are still concerns that Japan is making very passive efforts to resolve our issues that still remain. And also, how would you be able to show your truthful willingness to resolve and improve our bilateral relations going forward?
First of all, this trilateral cooperation amongst our three countries has opened a new chapter, and we made that announcement today. To talk about the differences from the past cooperation, for instance, in the past, it was about individual issues that we sought cooperation among ourselves. But now, as we have opened a new chapter in our cooperation for security, economy, science and technology, and development cooperation for the Global South, health, and women, across all of these issues, our three countries decided to closely work together, so it's much more comprehensive in nature. Such comprehensive cooperation has been launched by us today because currently we face complicated crisis and the threat from the DPRK. And across the world, we believe that we can together make a contribution to freedom and peace around the world. So that is our foundational understanding and our common and shared interests of the three countries, and not just for exclusionary interests of ourselves. Our interests are well aligned with the universal interests of the members of the global community. That's where we find our shared interests lie. And at the same time, This framework of comprehensive cooperation among our three countries will contribute to global supply chain resilience, global financial market stability, cooperation in the frontier technology sectors and science. Our three countries together have the best-in-class expertise in science and technology, and we are the ones who are implementing liberal democracies. Naturally, progress in science and technologies will bring benefits, tangible benefits to our people, not just in terms of security, but also in terms of economy and science and technology. But what is most important here is not about our own interests only. When we put our forces together, I believe that we can make a contribution to the advancement of freedom and peace in the world. And that is exactly where our interests are aligned.
Back in May of 2022, I met with the families of the Japanese abductees during my visit, heard their stories, and empathized with them and got a sense of the pain they're feeling. It's real. We know there are many families out there who still wait and worry and wonder, and we're not going to forget about them or their loved ones. And there's clear language on this on our joint statement. The bottom line is this, that we share a common position. We're committed to working together to see the return of all prisoners of war and those who have been abducted and detained. And by the way, one of the things we get asked many times, and I wasn't directly asked but implied, is what makes us think any of this is positive? Success brings success. When other nations see cooperation in the region, they make judgments about would they be better off if they make commitments? Will they move? Think about, as students of history, all of you, and you are, think about how many times successes have generated other successes when you don't anticipate it. And so I just think this is we're not going to forget, we're not giving up, and we're going to continue to make the case for the freedom of all of those detainees.
With regard to your question for me, first of all, I have strong feelings about strengthening bilateral relationships between ROK and Japan. I share that with President Yoon. The two countries, in dealing with international challenges, should cooperate. We're both important neighboring countries, and so friendship with President Yoon and a relationship of trust based on this, both countries as partners should open up a new era, and that is my thinking. This year, President Yoon came to Japan, and I visited the ROK. At international fora, we have repeated meetings. We have had repeated meetings. And between our two countries, including the economy and security, we've had forward-looking and concrete approaches which were started. It's already in motion dynamically. Economic security dialogue was started, or it has been decided on. In the area of export control, there have been progress, and also financial ministers and defense ministers have had meetings. And so we've had this very positive, forward-looking developments. And these are seen not only in the public sector, also in the private sector. We see a slate of developments, human exchanges and exchanges between business circles. We're seeing very active developments in all of these areas, and that is a reality. Going forward, we hope to accumulate these approaches with along with President Yoon, to strengthen our bilateral relations even further by generating results. We hope that people will understand Japan's feelings toward our bilateral relations, and we'd like to continue such efforts. Thank you.
はい。
Thank you very much. Then let me see from Kyoto, Tajiri-san, Kyoto News. Tajiri, Kyoto News. At Camp David with history, I do have a question to each of the leader. Mr. President Biden, it was mentioned at this summit meeting, but Russia's aggression of Ukraine is continuing. So what role do you expect of Japan? Prime Minister Kishida has mentioned that as China's threat in Asia is rising, Ukraine may be East Asia tomorrow. What do you think about this comment, President Biden? Under the situation in Asia where China's threat is rising, what is the meaning and significance of the trilateral relationship of Japan, US, ROK becoming stronger in multiple layers? President Yoon Suk-yeol, I have a question to Your Excellency. North Korea's nuclear missile development is a major security threat to Japan, South Korea, and the US. As North Korea's provocations continue to escalate, what is the meaning and significance of the three countries declaring a new era of partnership? Regarding the release of treated water at Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, did Prime Minister Kishida explain the matter at the trilateral or the bilateral summit today? At the recent Japan ROK summit meeting, Your Excellency, you expressed your intent to respect the IAEA report. Despite the strong domestic opposition, why do you demonstrate your understanding for the policy of Kishida administration? I ask for the reason. And to Prime Minister Kishida, this is the first time that the Trilateral Summit is held on a standalone basis rather than on the sidelines of international meetings. You have said that the trilateral cooperation will be raised to new heights for the security environment in East Asia, and without the resolution of abduction, North Korea is continuing nuclear missile development. What is the meaning for North Korea? And in East and South China Seas, by maritime advancement, China is continuing unilateral attempts to change the status quo. What is the meaning for China?
And you have a great imagination. One question ends up being six, but thank you. I'll try to answer all of them. I'm glad I didn't have you as my law professor when I said one question. Anyway, they're all legitimate questions. Look, on Ukraine, I and my country and the leadership of my country and both parties are very grateful for everything Japan is helping to deal with in Ukraine. And I mean that sincerely. They've showed strong leadership through the G7 as well, and contributed to a significant amount of financial and humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, as well as non-lethal military equipment. And, and they've joined so many other nations in holding Russia accountable through for international sanctions. If my memory serves me well, and I think it does, Mr. Prime Minister, we found ourselves in a circumstance where when I called you about Ukraine, I didn't have to convince you of anything. I started off to make the case that Ukraine was a circumstance where to think in the first quarter of the 20th century, another country would amass over 150,000 forces on the border of another country, or 150,000 forces, and invade that country without any rationale other than, if you read Putin's speech after he invaded, he talked about Kyiv being the motherland, it just was ridiculous, I think, and he talked about being Peter the Great. It was just, imagine if we'd done nothing. Imagine if we'd done nothing. And the point was immediately recognized, if I'm not mistaken, by you, Mr. Prime Minister, that we're in a situation where it could happen anywhere. We stood still. What signal would that send to China about Taiwan? What signal would that send around the world with nations more powerful on borders? But here's the deal. you contributed significantly to what I think is already let me put it this way. Russia has already lost. It cannot meet its original objective, which it stated. It's not possible. But then they've joined so many other nations in holding Russia accountable for international sanctions. With Japan's leadership, from day one, it has been critical to making it clear that the consequences for war extend well beyond Europe. Well beyond Europe. I say it in reverse. What would happen if an Asian country with 150,000 troops invaded another? You think that would not affect the industry, economy, and the foreign policy of nations in Europe and Latin America, all across the world? Would have profound impact. And with Japan's leadership from day one has been critical to making clear the consequences of this war extend well beyond Europe. Well beyond Europe. It's a global issue. It has impacts everywhere, and Prime Minister's comments at Shangri-La capture that. And by the way, you know, we talked about this being an inflection point. The world's changing. The world is changing. And about every 6 or 7 generations makes significant change. And there's a lot happening. And the idea that we're going to sit down in the rest of the world and say, well, that's only a European problem. There hasn't been that kind of invasion since World War II. And so, as for peace, we all want that, of course. Ukrainians want it most of all. And my team has been working very closely with President Zelensky's team and further peace formula, noting that nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, but nonetheless, we're meeting with them constantly. And your other 2 questions about China, I'll just say this summit was not about China. That was not the purpose of the meeting, but it did come, China obviously came up. Not to say we don't share concerns about the economic coercion or heightened tensions caused by China, but this summit was really about our relationship with each other and deepening cooperation across an entire range of issues that went well beyond just the immediate issues we raised. It was about more peaceful and prosperous Indo-Pacific, a region, quite frankly, that would benefit everyone living there and around the world if we get it right. It's not just here. It has a phenomenal impact. Think about what's, at any rate, I won't get going, I'll take too long, but as you've seen from the initiatives we're announcing here, today is just how committed we are to see this vision take place. And I think this relationship that we've put together, and I think you're going to see it expanded. It's not merely what we did today. This is a historic meeting, but we've laid in place a long-term structure for a relationship that will last and have a phenomenal impact, not just in Asia, but around the world. Someone once said in a different context that about health care provision in my country a while ago. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. Thank you. They have to answer their questions.
네, 제게
Yes, let me address the questions directed to me. First, as to North Korea's nuclear and missile provocations and the threats that are posed, and how we plan to counter those threats together among our 3 countries, let me address that question. Of the cooperative frameworks among our 3 countries, what is most symbolic out of those is our cooperation in defense area. Any provocations or attacks against any one of our 3 countries will trigger a decision-making process of this trilateral framework, and our solidarity will become even stronger and harder. And at the same time, missile information will be shared in a real-time basis, and systematic training and drills will be implemented in accordance with the systematic annual schedules, regular schedules, and regular trainings that we plan to carry out together against the DPRK's missile provocations. That will be our response. And at the same time, regarding your question concerning the water release from the Fukushima plant, as a matter of fact, that issue was not addressed during our summit because it was not on the agenda. But still, let me try to address that question. The Fukushima plant's treated water, if it's going to have some type of impact, it would flow through the entire Pacific Ocean, having an impact not just on our three countries, but all countries around the world. As such, for the sake of safety and health of the people of our three countries and all members of the international community, that should be something that we need to place the highest priority on. Regarding this treated water based on scientific principles, all of the processing should be carried out accordingly. And at the same time, internationally recognized and reliable IAEA's investigation results are something that we can trust. And I would like to make sure that everything is conducted and carried out in accordance with the procedures established by the IAEA, together with the international community and also together with the Koreans. Transparent data disclosure would be necessary, in my opinion.
Thank you. The question to myself, as you mentioned, nuclear and missile development by North Korea or unilateral attempts to change the status quo in the East and South China Seas are ongoing, and the security environment surrounding our three countries, it is becoming increasingly harsh day after day. Under this backdrop, on this occasion, we agreed to enhance the coordination between the U.S.-Japan and the U.S.-ROK alliances and to bring the trilateral security cooperation to new heights. This is indeed the requirement of this era, and by this summit, I am sure that the trilateral security cooperation will further advance and reinforce the regional peace and stability.
In particular, with regard to North Korea, we were able to put forward concrete results such as the implementation of annual Japan-US ROK multi-domain joint exercises and the establishment of a working group to address North Korea's cyber activities. I also stated that the abduction issue is a humanitarian issue with time constraints, and Joe and President Yoon reiterated their strong support for the immediate resolution of this matter. We also shared our recognition that the path to dialogue with North Korea is open. Furthermore, once again, the presidents of both countries aligned with me in strongly opposing unilateral changes to the status quo through the use of force. We will continue our efforts to further strengthen the strategic partnership among the three countries in order to defend the free, open, and international order based on the rule of law. That is all. Thank you.
Concludes.
I expect and hope to follow up on our conversation on Bali this fall. That's my expectation. Thank you.
This concludes our press conference. Please stay seated as the leaders depart, please. Please stay seated.
We're winning all the competition.